Welcome to Never Rewrite. I'm Isaac Askew.
And I'm Dustin Rea.
And I'm Jeffrey Sherman. And today we're going to talk about how agentic development is giving developers a taste of what it's like to be product owners. So I had this revelation yesterday when I was working with the agentic AI. In this case, it was Devin. And I had it write a ticket and I modified the ticket to clarify. And I told it to go off and do the work. And it went off and it did all this work. And it wasn't quite what I wanted. And I was like, my God, this is exactly what it's like when a product developer gives me some work and I go off and I deliver a giant chunk of work and it's not exactly what they wanted. It meets all the criteria, but it's not what they wanted. And I have never felt that way before. And so I imagine for many developers, this is also feeling like a shock. And so I'm hoping it creates empathy, but also I wanted to talk about creating the empathy across for product owners, and also just the tight iteration loops and getting things, the building that muscle of tight iteration loops and getting things in front of your customers sooner, and how that saves time in the long run.
Yeah. I think from my experience, I've seen like three main things that
Mm-hmm.
like I think every product owner will relate to. And probably as engineers here, like we'll all like immediately roll our eyes and be like, okay, yeah, now I see why we have to do these things for product owners.
Mm-hmm.
So like one, I call it like the prescription trap. So like being too prescriptive. That's
Yeah.
one. So we'll kind of go through the
And
three
I
and we
call
can
it being
talk about them.
solutioned.
Yeah. And then, right, solution. Yeah. Okay. The other one's completed staff work. So, like, how many times have you either worked with a junior or like, or maybe even like you've been in a different non-work situation, like with a contractor, and you've been like, hey, hang this thing, like hang this picture on the wall. And then they like hang it like right in the middle of the wall instead of like up. And you're like, no, like, obviously I meant like at a certain height, but I thought you just knew that. So
Yeah.
it's like, did you do the research and did you get everything ready? Like, did you understand my request before just executing the work? I think that's one.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think demos over diffs, right? So like being able to see the result over looking at the code. Because I think even sometimes I'm looking at the code and I'm like, yeah, this seems right. But then I spin it up and I'm like, okay, no, this is not right. It's not what I thought, So I don't know if does that resonate with you guys?
Yeah, I think in general, the product flow. So recently, I had a situation that was kind of similar to the window hanging thing, right? Where my boss was saying, hey, try out Claude and see if we can end up doing the thing where we can just kind of copy and paste the Jira ticket in and see if it'll do everything for us. See
Mm-hmm.
see how little you can do to get this story done through AI, just to test it out. And this was actually
This is
not
what I'm doing
recent.
in my day job. This is what they've asked me. See how
Right,
little you can do.
exactly.
Right.
So this was like I don't know, a couple months ago. So I picked up one of the stories there, and the story mentioned using, I forgot all the details of what exactly they wanted done. That's what it was. They wanted like a history instead of a recent date. They wanted like a history of every time this thing had happened, basically, instead of the last time this thing had happened. So the story was overly descriptive. It specified the name of the column, like created at like camel case, essentially. Um, and it specified exactly how it wanted it to get done. So usually
Mm-hmm.
from a product perspective, that's like a no-no. Like usually you say, tell us the customer problem, and as engineers, we decide how it's going to get done.
Yeah.
But the story kind of went into the engineering territory of this is how you should get it done. And because it was so literal, Claude took it and made a new column, even though we already had a created that column that was underscore created that, made a new one that was camel case created that, and worked with that because the story said so. We need to use this column, right? So it didn't follow conventions that we had because the story said, no, let's be specific and do it this way. And once I realized that, I was like, okay, let me make a new style prompt to Claude. And I said, here's the story. Don't take it literally. Understand the essence of it. I literally told it
Mm-hmm.
this. Understand the essence of what we're trying to get at, and look at our own coding, our code base, and figure out the best practice in which to implement what this main ask is. And when I gave it that guidance, it did exactly what I would have done. So that
Yell at the
missing
pod
piece,
people.
well, no, it used the right column, the right naming scheme. It encoded in a way that was not like adding. It didn't take it too literally.
Right.
And to me, that was like that's the context that we need today to not be like literal. I think Jeffrey, we've talked about this in the past couple of times, where the old engineer that's like a stickler for the acceptance criteria is now irrelevant. If you can't do anything,
they were always
outside,
irrelevant.
Well, but yes, back in the day,
they used to be somewhat useful, but they were always irrelevant.
Well, now they're super irrelevant because you need someone to understand the context behind the ask and not just go, oh, it wasn't in the acceptance criteria, because Claude can do exactly what the acceptance criteria does. We need someone who can look at that story and go, I know what you're asking here, but actually, no, we're going to do it this way.
Push back a little.
AI is really good at being sycophantic and just being like, you are the greatest. That's you're right to push back here. It does that all the time, right? We need to push back. We need to have some kind of rule in place, like a skill or agentic flow that does that. So the hanging the picture thing, where you would assume, okay, I didn't mean hanging the picture right off the floor. Obviously, it needs to be eye level.
Right.
I have different flows with that now, where, well, one, from the product perspective, I get why they get frustrated with engineers, because I can see how I have been Claude a few times now, for sure. But it's gotten a little bit better too, I think, in that before I did have to be that specific. Like, this is how high it should be. And now I've discovered if I'm a little less descriptive of like, oh, you should hang it exactly this high, and just say, hang it. Now it'll be like, you can actually like expand the rules, and it'll say something like, oh, calculating the normal eye height of the picture frame, blah, blah, blah. Historically, or reading the historical level of picture heights, it'll find that kind of thing and then implement it. So there's like this weird trade-off of being too specific versus too abstract.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I call this exact thing principles over prescriptions. So it's like, sometimes I may accidentally slip in something prescriptive, but I still want you to always go back to the principles document and then fact check me, right? And like, did I actually misremember something? Because I've done that before too, where it's like, I thought it was like this one column, but it was actually this other thing. And then so now it's like taking that as gospel, and it's like, no, I wanted you to go research that, then correct me if I'm wrong, and then fix what I'm talking about, not just like create this situation and tell me it was like that, So I think there's, giving it, you can either do it in like the one prompt, or it's like giving it this like durable kind of set of principles, right? And it's like, imagine if you had like a junior engineer that always operated with like the perfect principles that are in the README that like nobody reads, right? It's like, if that happened every time, like they wouldn't even be like a junior anymore. It'd be super effective, right? But like, so that you can kind of give it this context, and I think that's the, then getting it to like follow that versus what you said, I think is a different set of problems. But I think that's the concept that I use.
Yeah, one thing I have discovered myself doing, which gave me very product owner feels, was I'm like, oh, well, this is a simple task, and I give the AI a simple task, and it comes back with like 1,000-line merge request. I'm like, oh, this was actually not a simple ask. It sounded simple to me, but when you actually did the work, that was a lot of work. I don't want this. If this is this much work, I don't want it. But the funny thing there is, because it's AI and it's already done the work, I'm like, well, now, when product, it's like, oh, this is simple, and you look back, you're like, nah, it's not simple. And they say, oh, well, then never mind. Here, it's already done the work. But I'm like, it's now too much work for me to review it, so I'm not going to go with it.
Yeah. The generating too much to review is a big problem for sure. Sometimes I'll actually give it guidance and say, do the minimum required thing to solve this problem.
Be surgical.
Don't clean up anything. Be surgical. Don't clean up anything you see, because otherwise it'll go off, and especially if it's an old code base, it'll be like, oh, while I'm here, I'm going to go remove everything unused in this file. Oh, because that was unused, actually, that's the last time it was ever used, so I'm going to clean up all of the other references. Oh, but on the tests too for those references, and then suddenly you have what you're talking about.
Here's 3 DB migrations for the columns that weren't used. Yes, let's just throw those in there. Just don't worry about it. It's fine.
Smallest thing possible. And
Yeah.
so
That's why I like the demos, right? Like, and I think that's something I've seen too, where you can like get to like these kind of like MVP style products like really fast, but
Hmm.
when you
mhm,
add like actual engineering like rigor to like maintaining the software, like so, hey, I want you to do red green development with test driven, development. So it's like it's writing the unit tests based on your requirements before it starts writing the code. And then you
mhm,
say, hey, instead of I get the same thing where it's like I can't review all this code, and I can't, even if I did, I can't actually do it well. Like to like provide all these comments, it kind of defeats the purpose of like what
Hmm.
I need. I actually need to get it better from the one shot. But at the end, it's like if you have like end to end tests, like I like to set up Playwright and say confirm the requirements by building the actual video demo, and then so
mhm.
now you're just like you can read, watch the
Mm.
demo, and it's if it works, I mean it works. And I think that's one thing that also like will stand out for product owners where like, yeah, the demo worked until you met this brand new edge case that only this one style of customer like knew about. So it can also like provide the same type of like false confidence. You know what I mean? So
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
don't know. I kind of, it's a double-edged sword, kind of no matter which way you slice it.
Well, that to me goes back to but if you iterated more, right? If this was, hey, make sure that all the merge requests are smaller,
Mm-hmm.
then you can review it and you can look at the steps and just I can tell without going into detail that this is obviously correct or obviously wrong because it's only one change. I guess that's
Right.
making the changes more atomic. It is the same thing that the product people wish they had, or going a step back, it's what your customers wish product people would do with them. Where if
Right.
you would show this to the user,
Hmm.
they would give you feedback, and it's the same complaint. It's turtles all the way down. Of if you showed me smaller things, I could give you feedback earlier,
Mm-hmm.
and it would be
Yeah.
cheaper and faster.
Right.
I think that's where there's kind of like a disconnect of how fast that you actually can move. Because if you ask AI to do anything, it'll generate a ton of stuff, and it gives the perception, especially to people who aren't technical, that you're
Right.
moving very quickly. Like, wow, well, the engineer said this was going to take a day, and Claude did it in a minute.
Mm-hmm.
And I've run into this in a side project where getting the MVP going is very fast and impressive, and everyone's
Right.
excited. But then once you're actually in that maintenance phase that Dustin's talking about, the maintenance phase and further, you get this diminishing return thing where it keeps confusing itself. And now that's got so much context and it keeps tripping on itself. Or you say, no,
Mm-hmm.
no, never do that. And it goes, oh, never do that. Let
Right.
me update my memory. Let me update the README. And then it like has this huge list of things it should never do because of the context and gets worse and worse and worse.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, so I think the solution is almost in the problem itself too, right? Like kind of like what Jeffrey's saying is, I think the smaller atomic changes is correct because that lets you to give these smaller context windows. And like you said,
Mm-hmm.
the more that you give it these rules, you're bloating like that
Yeah.
context window every single time. So like you really want these really small atomic changes. Like I would rather be able to load all of my context and my rules
Mm-hmm.
and then do one small little thing and then kill that agent next one because you've got an orchestrator up at the top, right? It's like the
Mm-hmm.
sub agent. So your sub research, you sub analyze, make the change, do the code review. So you've got different agents that are getting their own memory for each of these. So I think there's like something between like the decomposition of the work and then how you like compile it and compose it back up. So like
Mm-hmm.
I try to apply the same way I would do a distributed team, like a team of teams. Like how would I build that architecture
Hmm.
for that team, right? And so kind of the default in my head, my default playbook is so you'd have a web app that's your front end, your main front end. You're going to have other web app front ends, your admin, customer support stuff, internal tools, customer portal, like whatever these other apps are. Maybe have some type of like agent or like on machine running service. Not every software has that, but some do. Then you're going to have your main API choke point, which is your, everything's coming in through there. Agents communicate with that. External agents could communicate with that. You're going to have like your mobile apps talking to that. And then you have a set of like shared libs, right? So you've got a backend lib, like a types lib that's maybe, if you've got different languages, it's got, the translations and, for each of those kind of all in one, like centralized, either one repo or one set of repos. So
Mm-hmm.
we know the agents know where to go to get that stuff, right? So you kind of have like this like decomposed architecture that like one big orchestrator agent could hold in its head and then delegate out tasks similar to like what a principal engineer would do with like a team of teams. And so now you get this decomposition, and the principals tell it how to build it back up. So you say we want never build UI one-offs. It must fit into the design system. It must use design token. You know, you said then you've got the UI context for that that agent, and then it's like how do you compose that back up without losing it. And I think then it's like, well, then also how do you deploy that across all like a team of actual humans trying to use all of that? And you start getting into like these dark factory patterns. It's like durable context, I think, is the answer to this. And it was the answer for humans.
Yeah.
Right. Like requirements and stuff, like even requirements that don't live past production. It was like, okay, well then who knows how does it work? Like even as humans, we needed some type of shared single source of truth, like memory. Right. And then we kind of decomposed ourselves and then recomposed the pieces back up to the customer. I think the same thing with agents. It's just like it's like a smaller, like a finer scale, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think this is why too that actually using change logs and commit histories are really, really relevant now because
right.
AI can do a great job at understanding that context historically. Like if the person who wrote it left 13 years ago and you're like, what is this code for? Back in the day, you just had to figure it out. And digging through all the different changes, or especially if someone just put a commit that says commit, as like the word for it, then you don't really know. But if you actually use it effectively and you have a 13-year history, Claude can look at that, oh, you asked me to do this, but this will introduce a regression that we fixed from 10 years ago. And you go, oh, that's what that thing was for. So you have like that context is super important, and actually it helps you understand way more of like the history of the changes of like who you're trying to support and what the fix was for, way more than you were able to. I think that's like kind of like the new, for me, like the legacy thing. Like we always talked about like having the empathy for the developer that came before, because whenever you look at the code and you go, who in the world would do it this way? And you think they're stupid. But it turns out they were just like you. They had all these different product requirements. They had these time constraints. Someone's like, just get it done. You're like, and they get it done in 30 minutes.
There was a bug in something that doesn't even exist anymore. Like it's defense against that.
Yeah, that too. Yeah, it could have been completely different architecture, and that worked effectively for the moment. Or someone's like, we've got a demo in 30 minutes with a huge customer. Just make it work. And they slap something together and they never took it out. And you think they're stupid for it, right? But AI can like go through and, especially because it can write its own commit messages too, have a way better paper trail, and you have that greater understanding. So to me, that's like for me and Jeffrey being the legacy, code-based people, that's like a huge thing for us.
Yeah, it definitely writes better commit messages, and it expands. I'm like, clean this up because blah blah blah, and it goes and it goes into like it'll talk about where all this was related to and blah blah. I'm like, that's great.
Yeah, it's really good at like reading back. Like if you have really good data integrity, like I feel like it's really good at detecting how this schema interacts with this schema, which I think whenever I'm doing in the past, when I was ever doing these like manual cleanup projects, like that was the first thing that I try to map is like, well, what is the data and what pieces do I change to put it into this condition, or this condition? And then now I know this is old condition, this is new condition, and here's the set of conditions that it's going to go through. And the AI can just do that, like just off the top. And I think that's like really changed like my relationship with legacy projects. I had a legacy project recently in Java, and like I don't have a lot of Java experience. I learned Java a long time ago, but I've never worked in it professionally. But because I can just apply the same engineering and architecture principles to that project, it's just like, oh yeah, here's all these things that are a problem. Here's environment variables hard coded into the repo. You might want to clean that up. And it's just like going through all of these things. And then now suddenly we have like modern CI/CD. We can deploy from GitHub from this legacy project that no one's ever deployed before, and you would not have invested in doing that 2 years ago. Like you just wouldn't have done that.
That's
like,
a big change.
Worth the time. And now you can just do that like while you're doing something else. And it's kind of like at first I was using it as like a lottery, like, let me just see if it can do it. And then as I realized it could, I was like, oh, okay, so there's like something here. Like we can actually like grab these legacy projects and keep them maintained. Like, and it's not like we don't have to like spend or invest a ton of money to do that. And then now we've got modern practices around the legacy platforms. And I think that's one of the biggest, upsides I've seen so far from deploying agentic workflows on legacy platforms.
But does it keep the changes small?
Yeah, I mean, if you use a harness, it does,
Yeah.
right? Or if you at least if your instructions are clear enough, it'll keep the commits small, but your PRs may be huge. Like I usually have pretty large PRs, I feel like.
All right. Yes. Well, I'll leave you with a quote from I forget who the quote is, but the quote was, dirty lasts long after quick has been forgotten. But
It does.
it does.
True.
But anyway, thank you all for listening. I'm Jeffrey Sherman.
Dustin Rea.
I'm Isaac Askew, and this is Never Rewrite.